actually did an interview panel with them 3 months earlier, failed it spectacularly. I didn't even get a call back from my take-home assignment, and then I published this blog post, and they got tons of traffic, and then they reached out and they saw that I actually applied before. Analyze crime data, and anything controversial, just analyze that data and put it out there.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Data Scientist Show. I'm Daliana Liu. Today, we have Feng. Previously, Jay has been on our podcast talk about the future of data science jobs and how to prepare data science interviews in 2024. We talked about data science interview trends in 2024. So if you haven't checked out that episode, I highly recommend. So Jay used to be a data scientist. He has worked at companies like Nextdoor, Monster, and later he founded Interview Query. And today we're going to talk about his journey from data scientist to entrepreneur. Welcome back, Jay.
Thanks, Daliana. Yeah. Came back with the exact same clothes, too.
So, yeah, we're just recording in the same afternoon, but break it up into episodes. So you started your career in electrical engineering and software engineer. How did you get into data science?
Yeah, so I started in electrical engineering because I got into UW, and they actually put me into this pre-major program for electrical engineering. I think I selected it in like a drop down when I was like filing for basically when you apply to colleges. And that's how little you know about what you're going to do too for the rest of your career. Because once I got in, I actually realized it's very hard to get into the electrical engineering program at UW if you did not do that pre-major program. So I did it by a stroke of luck, had good grades in high school, did terribly in college for those first 2 years. I feel like I was almost going to get kicked out of the program, but thank God I stayed in it. But once I was doing electrical engineering, I realized I didn't like it that much. It's a lot of like oscilloscopes, wiring, like working with like resistance and like working with your hands. And I was much more down to actually work on like the computer science kind of programming analysis side. So I ended up taking a stats class, really liked it. It was like statistical computing where we worked with Python for the first time ever. And so I learned Python. And then I learned about data science basically right after that and saw that it was like a growing field. So I started doing more data science projects and eventually got a job in California after I graduated by doing like a data science project that got recognized by the local newspaper, essentially. And so by getting that recognition, I got a bunch of offers. And then everyone who I was already interviewing with was also like, wow, we saw you in the news. That's great. Yeah, we'll just fast track you and give you an offer as well. And so that was kind of lucky for me, but that's how I got into data science.
Yeah, tell us more about that project.
Yeah, so I basically took this crime data set that was on there was this company that basically hosted data sets for the city government. And so they had this crime data set for Seattle that every single time there was like a 911 call, they would create a new record here, and then they would anonymize some of the data as well. And so I took that data set and I just mapped it over on the city of Seattle, and then I analyzed it and I did some models, and I basically figured out essentially what factors lead to an escalated call where the intention of the call is going to be is actually more important than what they're originally calling for, and which ones are like a de-escalation call where it's someone's like crying Bloody Mary, but actually it's like a neighborhood cat, right? And so I did some analysis around that. It got a lot of news coverage because crime always gets news coverage in any city. So for any aspiring data scientists out there, if you guys are trying to get a job, just write about crime and analyze crime because anyone will pick that stuff up. It's very interesting. And so, yeah, that basically, I posted that, and then one of the CTO of the Seattle Police Department reached out to me, and we chatted, and then some local news person also saw that. The guy DM'd me on Twitter, and so then he actually did a feature for the local news after that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Where did you publish that?
So I just published it on my blog, and then I posted it on Reddit or Hacker News, and
Yeah.
I don't even think it got traction, but then after the local news story came out, then it actually started getting traction on these websites.
Yeah.
And I also got that internship for that company that did the data sets for city governments because I actually did an interview panel with them 3 months earlier, failed it spectacularly. I didn't even get a call back from my take-home assignment. And then I published this blog post, and they got tons of traffic. And then they reached out, and they saw that I actually applied before. And so that was kind of funny. So I got an internship with them again after that, after being rejected the first time. And I think that was just them saying thank you for giving them so much publicity, because I don't even think I passed that second interview panel either.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great story. Data scientists, build your project, analyze crimes.
Exactly. Analyze crime data, and anything controversial, just analyze that data and put it out there. So, yeah.
I also live in Seattle. I remember I've seen public data sets in, I think, Seattle Data.gov, something like that. Yeah, because I was also started to create my own blogs. I use data from Zillow because I was moving almost every year. I was trying to figure out if there's a month that's cheaper than the other month, if this is a seasonality thing, and then I can start in a month when it's cheaper, then I can save probably $1,000 or $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
So that was the project I worked on. That also went viral on Medium. I think it was on the front page of Medium's data science tab for a day or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I actually, because I think people care about crime, people also like to save money. So those are just a few things people care about. Also lose weight, or if you can analyze some dating data, I'm sure that will go viral. I actually look at the Seattle government data. That was one of the ideas I wanted to have. I also thought about the same thing. Oh, I can do a heat map. But I think I didn't have the question you asked, what escalated, what de-escalated. So I think, if I just plot it out, that's kind of pretty boring. So I think the actual step you went into make your project more interesting. It's kind of like data scientist's job. You need to learn how to ask a good question, how to find a more interesting thing that inspires business decisions.
Yes, exactly. You also need to find a really interesting insight, which sometimes just doesn't happen at your data science job, right? Because you analyze a ton of A/B tests, none of them come back positive, but at least in the field of data journalism and such, doing some basic data stuff is already an edge because no one does that, right? I think even for that analysis, I think I just plotted also crime on a map. And because no one had done that before, it looked really interesting, and people could point to this neighborhood and be like, I always knew this was bad. This is a bad neighborhood. Or look at my neighborhood. It's great, right? Just giving some controversy out there is always good.
Yeah. It could have been me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. You could have gotten the data science job at Amazon much faster.
Oh, that's so funny. So did you get like a taste of fame? Did you become like a local famous person? What was that like?
Yeah, I don't know if I got, it was fun to get a lot of like comments on it. I think I got some haters too that was just like, this is just rudimentary data science.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, yeah, I'm like a senior in college. Like I can't do anything right now. Right?
Yeah, but I plotted out. I put it out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. It's all about finishing the project. I think you just got to do it. So, but yeah, that was the initial project. I felt like it was very lucky, at least. And I keep on telling everyone to try to do something similar if they're trying to get jobs and offers, because I remember getting so many emails from people that just read the article and they emailed me and they're like, hey, like just saw this project. This is great. We have this opening for a data science job at our company. Will you please check out the job posting? And this was like already when I was in the final stages of a few interviews. But I was like, wow, like I could, if I had just done this earlier, then I could have negotiated them all together and chosen the best offer. Yeah. So, but yeah, it was pretty nice to at least be able to get that kind of demand, I guess, as a new grad.
Yeah. And later, when you got your full-time job, did you feel that's the day-to-day that you expected? And what made you want to start a business to coach other people?
Yeah, so definitely after starting a full-time job, it was so much more different, right? Like you have such high expectations of your job, and then you actually go there and it's definitely going to be kind of different because you're just going to be used to like the day-to-day after that. I started wanting to do my own business for a while, I feel.
Since when?
So my second company is called Jobber. They got acquired by this big company called Monster Jobs, which is like very old kind of job company. I think it was like they had newspapers. Like they were in newspapers and then they moved online, or they were like the first company that moved online. And so in general, once we got acquired, we basically had much less work to do at the startup than what we had before, right? Before it was like you need to survive. Now it was more like you're being paid good salaries and you can kind of just do the bare minimum basically to survive. And so once you get into that mindset, a lot of my kind of day-to-day was about how do I build a side project so I can start my own company. And so I actually came up with a few different ideas that never really went anywhere because they never launched. But those are like the few projects that I started before that I could see fail that kind of led to eventually building Interview Query. Both of them were around kind of like data science. Like one was around trying to predict the prices of like concert tickets on the secondary market so I could try to buy and sell them. That one didn't really go anywhere because the actual problem is not about predicting a lot of the time. It's just about buying as many tickets as you can on Ticketmaster if you think about those scalper bots for Taylor Swift tickets. The second one was around housing as well because it has a lot of data. It was about like basically building out a tool to figure out like really good cash flowing rental properties. So looking at areas where there was a really good rent to price ratio and then featuring those listings in a newsletter or something. And that one also, it got a little bit of traction, like a few signups, but no one really paid and I didn't develop it for a larger market enough. Though I still think it has some legs. And so eventually I started Interview Query after going through the process of interviewing, and then I wrote about it on a blog post on Medium, and that blog post went viral. And it was basically like my experiences interviewing as a data scientist. And for basically 9 months or 6 months after I wrote that article, I constantly got messages like every week from people on LinkedIn that were like, hey, like, just read this article. This is so great. Yeah, like, I need help. Exactly. Is there anything that you could point me to? Or could you, like interview with me? And I was like, well, I'm not going to interview you. And I have nothing to point you to. But, you know, at some point, maybe something will happen where I can point you to something, right? And then it just didn't hit me until literally I saw a website that basically was the basis of Interview Query. It was called, I don't remember what it was called, but basically it was like 3 data science problems a week. They sent it to you via email, and then essentially the solution would be basically sent the next day if you paid. And when I saw this, like a light bulb clicked in my head, and I was like, all right, this is finally a business I can point people to. However, it's not my business, and I really want to do a startup, and I also don't think their problems are very good anyway. So I just decided to create that site for myself. And so I created this beginning of Interview Query was just an email newsletter where you got a problem every single day of the week, and the next day we'd send you the solution if it was paid. And then I went to every single person who basically messaged me on LinkedIn, and I just DM'd them the website link once it went live. And then we got 5 signups in the first week, and after that, the rest was just a lot of history in terms of building out Interview Query.
Yeah. So you built a company before, got acquired by Monster. What was that company?
So that company was Jobber. It was a Tinder for jobs company. I didn't actually build it. Like I was probably like the first data scientist there.
Okay.
Like the 4th engineer, I guess, on the team. But that company was like a Tinder for jobs company where you would swipe right to apply to a job, and then you'd swipe left to pass on a job. Mm-hmm. And so we were kind of famous for that was like really riding that wave of like Tinderification of everything.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there was Uber for X. This was like Tinder for everything.
Right, swipe.
Swipe to apply, exactly. Yeah. And so that company was really interesting because they actually fundamentally had data science problems there where like people would sign up, they wouldn't get matched to the right jobs. And so they really did need a data scientist to kind of like figure that system out. Unfortunately, that was not, that was all on my plate as a new grad data scientist.
Yeah.
So that was kind of crazy, but once you realize, a lot of the lessons there that I learned was that a lot of the best performing stuff that you can improve upon is just really low hanging fruit, like easy stuff. I think at one point we realized that 10% of our users were running out of jobs because their resumes weren't having enough skills to basically like feed in more jobs for them to match to. So we just parsed more skills from their resume, put into the Elasticsearch, and suddenly we increased revenue by 10, 20%, right? Just because those people can now swipe on more jobs.
Yeah.
So we were getting paid more. So just like easy stuff like that, you realize actually makes a much bigger difference than building out like a whole new deep learning algorithm to match people well. You realize most of the problems are just like this person didn't put enough information on their resume, therefore we can't match them to anything, right? So how do we get more people to add good resumes basically on their profile?
So did you join a company because you wanted to learn more about entrepreneurship and later start your own company?
No, I joined that company because my first company was kind of not very good. I joined this company right after college. It was an awesome experience because I met like 20 other new grads that were all in the same position, but then they didn't have any work for me to do, actually. It was actually a lot of me sitting around all day. And eventually I was like, all right, well, I think I got to learn instead of just sitting around all day and getting paid. So I'm going to go tip and find like a job that will actually give me a lot of work.
Yeah.
So when I joined the startup, then it was the opposite. I was like, wow, I feel like I'm working way too much. I need to go back and like just relax a little bit. But eventually we did get acquired. And so that kind of solved those issues.
Yeah. And looking back at your path, did you feel you planned to be an entrepreneur at some stage of your career, or it just happened because you solved this demand?
Yeah, I definitely want to be an entrepreneur, I think, especially if you're the type of person that I feel doesn't do well with responding to like structure and authority almost in some cases, right? Like I didn't do that well in school, like in college, and I always attributed that to being like just not really enjoying the material that much, or honestly just feeling incompetent in the face of all these tests and such. But I think now looking back at it, it was just realizing that it was just like one path that everyone says that this is how it's supposed to go. And at the end of the day, when you're an entrepreneur, you kind of want to just do your own thing and find ways to like make money off of that. And so for me, it was more about how do you like craft a lifestyle that you want to live and then slowly find ways to support that lifestyle essentially. And entrepreneurship was definitely one of those ways, because I also didn't go the typical VC route. Like Interview Query is completely bootstrapped. Like we started from $2,000 that I just transferred into a bank account. And then once we made more than $2,000 from sales from customers, I just transferred the $2,000 back into my own bank account.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely much more different than running like a VC company where you have to do exploding amounts of growth every year. It's much more of a lifestyle business. And I think it's more interesting as well. And I think it's kind of a growing trend as well. So
yeah. How many hours do you work today, right now?
How many hours did I work today? Does this count as work? This kind of counts as work, right?
I guess what I'm trying to ask is like, how many hours do you work per week? Do you have a 4-hour work week, 20-hour work week?
Yeah, that's true. So I would say I work anywhere from 10 to 30 hours a week, but probably it really depends. I don't think there's ever any week that I work more than 40 hours a week now. Mm-hmm. But I'm also doing another marketing agency thing on the side. And so I think that's also contributing to more hours recently, around the 30-hour mark. But yeah, I would say typically probably around 16 to 20 hours on both businesses somehow.
And then you get data scientists into full-time roles where they work 50 hours a week.
Yeah, yeah, that's the ultimate scam, I guess. That's a good point.
So you make it sound so easy. You write this viral blog post, you got inbound requests, and start a company. What were some big challenges you faced when you started Interview Query? And at what point you realized, I need to do this full-time?
Yeah, so the initial challenges were literally from the very beginning, I think, was just building out the MVP took such a long time. And like the smart way to do it, I believe, is to just essentially create your own landing page, do it all no code. This is a content-based business, right? I'm writing the questions, I'm writing the solutions. And so I could just have an email list in MailChimp and hook it up together and have something with a Stripe pricing page by like in 2 days, right? Instead, I did it the dumb way, and I partnered with my co-founder. But it was actually the smart way. But at the time, it felt like the dumb way. And it took 3 months to build because he was working like 2 other jobs at the same time. Like he had his main job, he had a side project he was working with like another one of our friends, and then he was working on this side project with me. And it was just basically me asking him, what have you done? Can we speed this up? Come on, like it's taking 3 months, right? It
Yeah.
should take 2 days. But in actuality, so what happened in the long term was that like he ended up being my co-founder, and then if I didn't have him, then we wouldn't be able to actually build out Interview Query until an actual fully fledged platform it is today, right? If it had just been me and I was just working on my own, then I don't know if I would have committed to being able to actually build out like a real web app versus just kind of being like, all right, let's just make this like a newsletter. And then I don't know if I could technically scale this because I don't have a co-founder.
Right. Although it was slow, but it created a foundation that enable you to scale.
Exactly.
Later.
Yeah. And he specifically, my co-founder, Shane, specifically built it to actually scale out and eventually be able to sell the business was in his mind, kind of like that goal, so that we could be able to support more and more users. And so I didn't really think about it like that in the beginning. I still think that if I were to do it again today, I'd probably build out the 2-day kind of launch because it's so hard to launch things now, and then eventually rebuild it for scale once you get that traction. But I think honestly now it was probably a good idea that we spent so much time slowly building it because it was so much easier to kind of scale out. We had a whole database, we had an email sending system, all of our questions were in the DB, and just adding new features wasn't going to be like a huge headache where we'd be like, all right, well, we can keep on adding to this mess, or we could completely rebuild our web app from the ground up. And I see that with other companies right now, and they're always pushing it off, like the major rebuild, but it's like a ticking time bomb. So you want to make sure that you actually do it right from the beginning.
Right. So you don't have a lot of tech debt.
Yes, exactly. Like tech debt is inevitable, especially with startups. And as you like kind of build out more features that your customers want, but at least having that solid foundation and a solid partnership is good for making sure it happens.
Yeah. Do you remember the launch day? Do you remember how it happened? How did you know it was a success?
Yeah. So I do remember the launch day was like in June. And I was super excited about it because every single sale felt like this huge adrenaline rush. Like people on the internet were giving me money. You don't understand when you get that first money from like internet or strangers, that's a feeling of pure gold. And now I'm desensitized to it, right? I don't even think about it anymore. But like in the very beginning, it's awesome. And I still think that would probably happen again if I started something new. It would feel good. But like it was really funny because we reached out to people via LinkedIn and we just kind of sent it out. We marketed it that way. We posted on like Hacker News and such. But because it was an email newsletter, it had its own kind of traction to begin with, where people were just sending each other the solutions and the questions, right? That was kind of a nice viral effect from having a newsletter to start out with. So that was kind of like how we got that started. We started actually scaling it out once we found that content was probably the key for most of the marketing. And so eventually, as we were building it out and getting more and more users and talking to more of them, we realized that a lot of them had different problems besides just studying the questions and the answers. A lot of them, for one, just wanted the entire question bank right away. Obviously, we didn't have the infrastructure for that as well. But a lot of other people also wanted to understand the interview process at these companies, right? Like they had an interview at Facebook coming up and they had no idea what to expect, right? They knew that there were going to be some questions around like SQL and some case studies, but they didn't know like when they were going to receive these questions, what the expected turnaround time was, basically what kind of offers they were going to receive and how hard they'd be. And so I started blogging about, all right, here are 3 members. They talk about their Facebook data science interview. Here's what to expect. Here's the interview process. Here's the interview questions. Here's some example ones. And I wrote that on Medium, and then a lot of those articles started going viral on their own. And so because no one had ever, I guess, just written about the interview experience in a blog format. And so I started doing that for every single company that was really popular. And that got us a lot, probably our first 1,000 users. Honestly, it was just going on Medium, writing about the Netflix data science interview, the LinkedIn data science interview, right? And just repeating that for all these different kinds of interviews and seeing people really be interested in, all right, if I ever was like going to interview for LinkedIn, what would this look like? And I think a lot of them just kind of found out that way.
Yeah. And later you also started your YouTube channel. So compared to the newsletter channel, what's the quality of leads there?
Yeah, so YouTube converts actually really well. It still does because people have this vested interest in you when they see a real person talking and explaining and basically going through their life, and also basically you're a real human being at the end of the day, right? And so what we see is that YouTube does convert really well, probably 3 to 5 times better than any other channel. But it's also probably 3 to 5 times harder to make a YouTube video than any other piece of content, right? It has to be you for the most part. You can't really outsource being an influencer, but you can outsource writing blog posts, writing questions, and doing almost anything else, right? So I started making YouTube videos just to kind of drive traffic. I saw that it was like a viable strategy. And so I just started by taking the blog posts that I'd written that had gotten a lot of traction and just reciting it in front of the camera for YouTube. And that's kind of how that iteration started. Like I learned obviously a lot about what it was like to actually make YouTube videos when you do that, like in terms of quality production and everything. But it was, for the most part, really eye-opening towards what it's like to be a creator when you are first doing it for your business versus the other way around of kind of being a creator first and then thinking about what businesses you can market afterwards.
Yeah. If someone wants to start a consumer business today, which channel do you recommend? Is it newsletter, YouTube, or LinkedIn?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say YouTube is probably the best because you have like more of a stickier audience, I would say. Like with LinkedIn, I think, you've had a lot of success with LinkedIn, but for me, whenever I posted stuff, I think, it's still a very good brand awareness channel for us, but it's not as much as it's not as good as a converting channel for us. And I don't know exactly why there, but I think at the end of the day, if you're just someone who is like someone that they scroll through and they see your face when they scroll all the time, it's probably a little bit different than sitting down and watching someone speak or present something to you for 10 full minutes, right? Yeah. It's like undivided attention. Mm-hmm. So I do think that there is something about that kind of content marketing where you're focusing on creating long form content that people really resonate with, that you're getting like probably less traffic overall than if you were to do some LinkedIn content, but it's more directed and it's more converting traffic because they really resonate with what you're doing.
Yeah. And initially you do everything on your own. You create your blog posts, make YouTube, and now the team is getting bigger, the business bigger. How did you transition from this solopreneur to manager CEO role? What was the shift you have to make?
Yeah, well, the first shift is always just trusting someone else to do something, which is really hard, especially if you don't have existing management experience, and I didn't at all. And so initially it was literally just having people like copy edit my articles, right? And doing kind of standard virtual assistant type data entry tasks. And that was really hard to kind of start out with. Like it was definitely something that was hard to think about how you can outsource something and not have it done correctly and just the way that you want. I think that through time, you end up kind of experimenting and figuring out how to kind of better manage people. And not only that, but just how to hire better people, right? Yeah. Because I think there's also this issue where in the beginning you realize you think you know what good is when you hire. Yeah. And you realize that you're just not working like hard enough at hiring and recruiting. Like at the end of the day, you have to go through a lot of applicants to see who's good, who's bad, and what are the qualities of people that are actually good employees. And so I wouldn't consider myself a great employee at the end of the day if I look back at it. I see myself as a better entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And when I look out for people as employees, I try to avoid people that are actively like me sometimes, unless we have very much aligned interests in terms of what we're doing. I do want us to be in sync on some things, but I also want them to have a lot of harder work ethic towards things that they don't want to do. And I find myself as a person who's not very good at doing things that I don't want to do. And so you got to find complementary people as well.
Yeah. What's your advice for people who just started this transition from a, say, data center engineer to a CEO? How do they learn to hire better people?
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting transition for sure. I think for hiring better people, one would be to trust your gut instinct as well in the hiring process, and to, for one, don't try to pick the person that just meets the hiring bar immediately. Like, I think for me, I still do this where I will just instantly choose the person that kind of meets the general criteria, even if there could be someone much better. And I just don't know what that is when I'm initially recruiting for roles.
Yeah.
The second is to, I would say, find people and go through almost like a trial period with them. And the reasoning why is because it's much easier to figure out if someone is good to work with when you actually try to work with them, right? And if you actually try to integrate them with your system. And I think I would do this for anyone going forward, but it's so much easier to just do that trial period, figure out if it's a good fit on either side, see if you have similar working styles before doing anything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lastly, I think is just don't be too cheap with hiring. I think I was like way too cheap because I was bootstrapped and I just didn't realize that you have to pay for quality. And now I'm starting to slowly realize that more and more. I still want to find people that are scrappy and are growing rapidly and kind of develop and work with them to develop their skills. But I still think that it's really important to be like paying market wage, at least if you're working with international contractors or if you're working with people in the US for whatever country they're in, because it's just good to keep and retain top talent that way. And I think that there are a lot of different kinds of benefits you can offer. I think outlining what those benefits are and selling those to employees is really important as well. Like for us, our benefit for Interview Query is that we are super asynchronous. We hate meetings. I meet with everyone once a week, and that's it.
Yeah.
And we'll have a stand-up, but for the most part, if you get your stuff done, then you're good to go. And I don't even care if you're sleeping at your desk 90% of the time, right? Yeah. So a lot of the times people are on completely different time zones, and it just works because at the end of the day, we care about just getting the work done and not really about are you online like all the time.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So before we wrap up, what does success mean to you and how are you working towards it?
Yeah, so that's a very big question. But I think success to me means hitting just general goals and continuing to slowly move the goalposts up for what I'm able to do, right? If you had asked me this 4 years ago when I was just starting Interview Query, success would have been getting to $10,000 a month in revenue, right? Because for me, that would have been $5,000 for me at that time with my co-founder, where we split it equally, and I would have been able to pay for all my expenses at that time for $5,000 a month. Now, I think as I'm getting older, right, like your expenses kind of go up if you want to start a family, kind of have kids, do all this stuff. So that isn't like realistic success for anyone at this point. But it was a great goalpost moment to have, right? Because now I have bigger ideas of like, all right, well, I've built like a company to much more than $5,000 a month. I think I could do the same thing again, maybe in half the time, or maybe like potentially build another company to 10 times as big as Interview Query, right, in the same amount of time. And so I think those to me are good measurable goals of success. I would love to actually own multiple companies and just kind of have a portfolio of like companies and have people that are running them. And so for me, I think that's something that I'm keeping on the back of my mind. If is just like working with really smart people that want to run companies and helping strategically advise them or work with them or maybe even operating with them. But yeah, I kind of think just like nowadays, it'd be really fun to continue to grow a portfolio of digital businesses and work with awesome people.
Yeah, while maintaining the same lifestyle?
While maintaining the same lifestyle, while maintaining a lifestyle of like under 30 hours a week of work, because or at least of what you would define as work, right? Because I don't define like reading articles online and listening to podcasts as work, right? Or taking just like a coffee meeting with someone. But I feel like that just happens throughout the day as well. And it helps contribute to your career, no doubt, but it doesn't really feel like work, right? So yeah, I think the goal is to work smarter, not to work that much harder. And ultimately also to have an equal balance in your life as well. So
We're at this recording studio, we only have 3 more minutes. Anything else you want to tell our audience about your entrepreneur journey?
No. So if you guys have any business ideas or are looking for an investor in a business that you're starting that is maybe not VC backed, please reach out to me. If you guys need any advice or business advice, I'd love to talk as well from a data science background. And yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the most of it. I'm starting to slowly pivot some content over to the entrepreneurship side.
Okay.
So when that is eventually going to happen, I'll let you guys know, or I'll let you know, Daliana.
Yeah, let me know. That would be very exciting. I definitely need some entrepreneurship advice from you. And I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, I did too. So I'm excited to do another one in the near future.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Jay.
All right.